What's happened?
Overheated. Brake light, warning light, headlight, warning light, EPC, engine light, and the car was like, I'm not stopping here because I can't.
The first thing Mat Armstrong saw was not a beautiful road stretching across Europe or a crowd cheering for $1 million hypercar. It was a dashboard filled with warning lights, flashing one after another like a Christmas tree, while the engine struggled to stay alive. Imagine spending thousands of hours rebuilding one of the world's most famous supercars, only to watch it threaten to break down again before your biggest journey even begins. Most people would have given up. Most people would have accepted that Bugatti is simply too complicated, too expensive, and too exclusive for anyone outside the factory to truly understand. But Mat Armstrong has never been like most people. Over the last few years, millions of viewers have watched him buy damaged supercars that experts believed were beyond saving. Again and again, he proved that patience, determination, and a willingness to learn could overcome even the biggest challenges. Yet, nothing he had done before compared to this. Sitting in front of him was a Bugatti Veyron, one of the most legendary performance cars ever created. A machine that changed the automotive world forever with its unbelievable speed, engineering, and price tag. Owning one is a dream for almost every car enthusiast. Repairing one is something very few people have ever attempted. Many believed it simply could not be done outside Bugatti's own workshops. The company itself has built an image around the idea that these cars require factory-level expertise, highly trained technicians, and extremely expensive replacement parts. Every repair seems to come with eye-watering costs, making owners believe they have no choice but to rely on the manufacturer. That reputation has scared countless people away from even thinking about repairing a Bugatti on their own. But what if one of the biggest problems on a multi-million-pound hypercar could actually be solved with a simple part costing less than a family dinner? What if the expensive solution offered by the manufacturer was never the real answer in the first place? That question lies at the heart of this incredible story. It is not just about fixing a broken car. It is about challenging long-held beliefs, questioning whether expensive always means better, and proving that knowledge can sometimes be more valuable than money. As this journey unfolds, you will see moments of triumph, frustration, surprise, and pure determination. You will watch a self-taught mechanic face problems that many professionals would never dare touch. You will see a simple rubber hose outperform a replacement module costing thousands of pounds. You will witness a road trip across Europe that pushes both man and machine to their limits. Along the way, there will be unexpected breakdowns high in the Swiss Alps, shocking discoveries about aging supercars, encounters with police, visits to legendary automotive locations, and emotional victories that make every challenge worthwhile. But perhaps the biggest surprise of all is not hidden inside Bugatti's engine. Instead, it is hidden within the way we think about expensive machines and the companies that build them. Sometimes the biggest problems have the simplest solutions, and sometimes the people who refuse to give up end up changing an entire conversation. Mat Armstrong's Bugatti adventure is far more than another repair story. It is a reminder that curiosity, patience, and determination can accomplish what many believe is impossible. Before the journey finally reaches the glamorous streets of Monaco, before thousands of people stop to admire the car that almost never drove again, one simple discovery inside an old fuel tank will completely change everything. That tiny discovery, worth only 40 pounds, will raise questions that even one of the world's most respected car manufacturers may struggle to answer, and will prove that the real value of experience can never be measured by the price printed on an invoice. For most people, spending thousands of pounds on a replacement part would seem like the end of frustrating repair. After all, when a company like Bugatti tells you a certain component has failed, it is easy to believe they know exactly what they are talking about. That is especially true when the car in question is a Bugatti Veyron, a machine that has earned a reputation as one of the most advanced and complex production cars ever built. Every part of the Veyron is surrounded by stories of incredible engineering, eye-watering maintenance bills, and repair costs that often sound impossible to believe. Owners have become used to hearing that even the smallest problem can lead to a bill worth more than an average family car. Because of that reputation, very few people question the advice they receive from the manufacturer. If Bugatti recommends replacing a part, most owners simply pay the money and hope the problem disappears. Mat Armstrong found himself facing exactly that situation. His Bugatti had developed a fault that caused the engine to start, but then quickly shut itself off. No matter what he tried, the car refused to run properly. Like any sensible mechanic, he wanted to identify the exact cause before replacing expensive components. But after repeated attempts to contact Bugatti and countless hours searching for answers, he was eventually told that the fuel control module needed to be replaced. The price was shocking. Around £4,500 for a single electronic module. Even worse, Bugatti reportedly informed him that once the part was purchased, it could not be returned under any circumstances. That meant that the diagnosis turned out to be wrong. The money would simply disappear. For most people, that kind of risk would be terrifying. Yet Matt had come too far to stop now. He bought the module, installed it carefully, and prepared himself for the moment he had been waiting for. He turned the key, expecting the engine to roar back to life, and finally put months of frustration behind him. Instead, exactly the same thing happened. The engine fired up for a moment, stumbled, and died again. Nothing had changed. The expensive replacement had solved absolutely nothing. At that point, many people would have started replacing more expensive parts one after another, hoping to eventually find the right answer. That approach is common in modern car repairs because it is often faster to replace components than spend hours diagnosing them. But Matt has built his entire career by doing the opposite, rather than guessing. He believes every problem leaves clues if you are patient enough to look for them. Instead of becoming angry about the wasted money, he went back to basics. He connected diagnostic tools, studied live data, compared readings from different parts of the engine, and began following the evidence instead of assumptions. Slowly, a pattern started to appear. One side of the engine was losing fuel pressure, while the other side continued working normally. That observation changed everything, because it meant the problem was likely somewhere inside the fuel delivery system rather than the expensive electronic module he had just installed. To test his theory, he swapped sensors from one side of the engine to the other. The fault stayed exactly where it had been before. He checked vacuum lines, inspected electrical connections, and carefully ruled out one possible cause after another. Every failed test brought him one step closer to the real answer. This methodical approach is what separates experienced mechanics from people who simply replace parts until something works. Good diagnosis is often less about knowing every answer and more about asking the right questions. Eventually, all the evidence pointed toward one place that nobody had seriously considered at the beginning: the inside of the fuel tank itself. Reaching it would require far more work than replacing a sensor or plugging a computer, but by now Matt trusted the evidence more than expensive guesses. He and his father prepared to remove the fuel tank, knowing that whatever they found inside could finally reveal why one of the world's greatest supercars refused to stay running. Neither of them expected that hidden inside that tank was a tiny piece of rubber that would completely change the story and raise serious questions about how expensive repairs should really be approached. VidIQ, Matt and his father knew that reaching the fuel tank would not be a quick or easy job. On a normal family car, replacing a fuel hose might take a couple of hours, but the Bugatti Veyron is anything but normal. Every component is packed tightly into the car, and many parts have to be removed just to gain access to the area you actually need to work on. That is one of the reasons maintenance on these cars is so expensive. It is not always because the parts themselves are rare or magical. In many cases, the labor involved is enormous. Still, Matt had reached a point where there was no other choice. Every test had pointed toward the fuel system, and if he wanted the truth, he had to look inside. Piece by piece, the car was carefully taken apart. Bolts were removed, panels came off, and the fuel tank was finally lowered from the vehicle. Even after years of rebuilding crashed supercars, moments like this still carry a sense of excitement, because you never know what you are about to discover. Sometimes you find exactly what you expected. Other times, the real problem is something so small that it almost seems impossible. As the tank was opened, Matt immediately noticed something unusual. Inside was a short rubber hose that should have been strong and flexible enough to carry fuel under pressure. Instead, it looked like it had been slowly destroyed over many years. The rubber had become soft, weak, and sticky. Rather than holding pressure, it started breaking down until it resembled thick black, grew more than a proper fuel hose. Every time the fuel pump tried to send fuel toward the engine, some of it escaped through the damaged hose instead of reaching the injectors. That meant one side of the engine could never build the pressure it needed to keep running properly. Suddenly, every symptom made perfect sense. The engine was not suffering from a complicated electronic failure at all. It was simply being starved of fuel because of one worn-out piece of rubber hidden deep inside the tank. The discovery was almost unbelievable after all the expensive diagnostic equipment, the replacement control module, and weeks of frustration. The true cause was a simple hose that cost only around 40 pounds to replace. Mat installed a new submersible fuel hose designed to survive constant contact with modern petrol. Once everything was carefully reassembled, the moment of truth arrived. Everyone watching knew how much was riding on this test. If the engine still failed, they would be back at the beginning with no clear answers. But as the key turned and the engine came to life, the difference was immediate. The Veyron idled smoothly, responded perfectly, and for the first time in weeks showed no signs of the original fault. Relief quickly turned into celebration because months of hard work had finally paid off. More importantly, the repair proved an important lesson that extends far beyond this one Bugatti. Expensive machines are still machines. No matter how advanced a vehicle becomes, it is still made from thousands of individual parts. And every one of those parts can wear out with age. Rubber does not care whether it is installed in an economy hatchback or a million-pound hypercar. Time, heat, fuel, and weather slowly affect every material. One interesting part of Mat's investigation involved modern fuel. He explained that today's petrol often contains more ethanol than it did when the Veyron was first built. Ethanol is useful in many ways, but it can also be harder on older rubber components that were never designed for this type of fuel. While it is impossible to know exactly how the previous owners cared for the car, years of exposure to changing fuel blends and simple aging may have helped cause the hose to fail. It was a reminder that even legendary cars must adapt to changing conditions over time. The biggest surprise, however, was not the failed hose itself. It was the incredible difference between the price of the failed diagnosis and the price of the real solution. A repair that seemed destined to cost thousands had ultimately been solved with a part worth less than many people spend on dinner. That contrast would soon become one of the biggest talking points in Mat Armstrong's entire Bugatti journey. Yet fixing the fuel problem was only the beginning. Now that the Veyron was finally running properly, Mat was ready to attempt something that many people believed was even more ambitious than rebuilding the car itself. Instead of loading it onto a trailer or keeping it safely in his workshop, he decided to drive it across Europe on a journey that would test every system, every repair, and every decision he had made throughout the project. The real adventure was finally about to begin. With the fuel system finally working as it should, Mat Armstrong stood in front of a decision that would determine whether all his hard work had truly been worth it. Fixing a car inside a workshop is one thing. Driving hundreds or even thousands of miles across different countries is something completely different. A short test drive around the block can hide problems that only appear after hours on the road. Heat builds up, parts expand, electrical systems work harder, and every mile places more stress on the engine, transmission, cooling system, and suspension. For most people, even after completing such a major repair, the safest option would have been to transport the Bugatti on a trailer to its next destination. That would reduce the risk of another breakdown and protect the investment. But Mat has never been interested in taking the easy route. Throughout his career, he has believed that cars are meant to be driven, not hidden away. If he wanted to prove that his rebuilt Bugatti Veyron was truly reliable, there was only one way to do it. He would drive it across Europe all the way to Monaco, covering hundreds of miles through changing weather, busy highways, quiet country roads, and the challenging mountain passes of Switzerland. It was an ambitious plan that excited millions of viewers because nobody knew whether the car would make it. This was not just another road trip. It was the ultimate test of every repair Mat had made since buying the damaged Veyron. Every turn of the wheels would answer a question that critics had been asking for months. Had he really built a dependable Bugatti, or would the car fail the moment it was pushed beyond the comfort of his workshop? As preparations began, the excitement inside the team was impossible to ignore. Bags were packed, cameras were charged, and the route was carefully planned. Unlike many ordinary road trips, This one required serious thought because the Bugatti's enormous 16-cylinder engine consumed fuel at an incredible rate. Even when driven sensibly, the Veyron is famous for drinking petrol faster than almost any production car ever built. Mat knew fuel stops would become a regular part of the journey, and each visit to the pump would serve as another reminder that owning a hypercar is very different from owning an everyday vehicle. Still, he accepted those costs because the purpose of the trip was never to save money. It was to prove a point. As the Bugatti rolled out onto public roads, the atmosphere immediately changed. Instead of sitting under workshop lights surrounded by tools, the car was finally doing what it had been designed to do. The deep sound of its engine echoed through towns and countryside, attracting attention everywhere it went. Drivers slowed down to take pictures. Children pointed excitedly from passing cars, and people at fuel stations stopped whatever they were doing just to watch the rare machine arrive. Even those who knew nothing about cars could sense they were looking at something special. The Veyron has that effect on people. Years after its release, it still turns heads wherever it appears because very few people ever get the chance to see one in person. For Mat, every smile and every photograph represented something much bigger than simple admiration. It was proof that the car had escaped the workshop and returned to the real world where it belonged. Mile after mile, the Bugatti continued running smoothly. The expensive repair that failed was now nothing more than an unpleasant memory, while the simple 40-pound hose quietly did its job without drawing any attention at all. Sometimes the best repairs are the ones nobody notices because everything simply works as it should. During the journey, fuel quickly became one of the biggest talking points. Every stop at a petrol station reminded viewers just how costly it is to drive a machine capable of extraordinary performance. The numbers climbed rapidly, reaching hundreds of pounds long before the team had traveled across the entire route. Yet despite the growing fuel bill, Mat never appeared discouraged. In fact, he seemed happier with every passing mile because each refill meant the Bugatti was still moving under its own power. Every mile erased another doubt that critics had expressed since the beginning of the rebuild. The Veyron was no longer just a repaired project sitting inside a garage. It had become a functioning grand tourer once again, comfortably crossing borders exactly as Bugatti had originally intended. But one destination mattered more than any other on the map. Hidden among the beautiful roads of eastern France stood the birthplace of the Veyron itself, the legendary Bugatti factory in Motium. For Mat, visiting that location carried enormous emotional significance. It was a place where his car had first come to life many years earlier, and after everything that had happened during the rebuild. Standing outside those famous gates promised to become one of the most unforgettable moments of the entire adventure. The closer Mat Armstrong came to Motium, the more emotional the journey became. This was not just another stop along a European road trip. For any Bugatti owner, Motium is almost sacred ground. It is where some of the world's greatest performance cars are carefully built by skilled engineers and craftsmen who spend countless hours creating machines that represent the very best of automotive engineering. Every Bugatti begins its life there before being delivered to wealthy owners around the world. For Mat, however, the visit carried an even deeper meaning. This was a place connected to months of frustration, unanswered questions, expensive parts, and countless obstacles during his attempt to rebuild the Veyron. Ever since buying the damaged car, he had hoped for more support from the manufacturer. Instead, much of the journey had forced him to depend on his own determination, his father's experience, and the knowledge he gained through careful testing and research. Now, after finally bringing the Veyron back to life, he wanted to stand outside the factory where it had originally been created. It felt like bringing the car home after an incredibly long and difficult journey. As the Bugatti rolled through the quiet streets leading toward the famous headquarters, excitement mixed with curiosity. Mat had imagined this moment many times. Perhaps there would be visitors taking photos outside. Maybe there would be employees walking around or fellow enthusiasts admiring the cars. At the very least, he expected to feel the energy that usually surrounds one of the world's most respected automotive brands. Instead, what greeted him was something completely unexpected. The area appeared almost deserted. The large buildings stood silently in the afternoon light, but there was very little movement around them. The parking areas contained only a small number of vehicles, and the place felt strangely quiet. For someone who had traveled hundreds of miles to visit the birthplace of one of history's greatest hypercars, the atmosphere was surprising. Matt looked around, trying to understand what he was seeing. This was a company whose name represented speed, luxury, and engineering excellence across the world. Yet at that moment, it felt almost disconnected from the excitement that surrounded its cars. The silence gave him plenty of time to reflect on everything that had happened during the rebuild. He remembered the damaged Veyron sitting helplessly in his workshop. He remembered the expensive replacement module that failed to solve the problem. He remembered the countless hours spent searching for the real, causing